as Penny was probably sharing. We're really excited about today's session. I think it represents several dimensions of work and collaboration that have been happening in the Saving Brains community and more in an extended community over the last several years. Starting from this idea that we need to be really looking at how we're understanding change in the course of our work. The change that's happening in our implementation processes and what we're learning, and the change that's happening in the world as a result of our work, and how those things work together. And we've branded this idea of measurement for change. We appreciate Penny's leadership in this space over the last few years. What's exciting about today is I think it reflects an opportunity to share the results of one strand of that work and a wonderful collaboration that has come both through the engagement of Porticus as one of the partners in this learning platform and a relationship with a team at the University of Utrecht. And so together, in support of the set of articles for the journal and the work that's been done together has been, I think, a really exciting opportunity, and we're hoping is really contributing something for the larger field as well. And so today we're excited to hear from innovator teams that have been part of that process and our colleagues. And so we're looking forward to the conversation today. And just a reminder that in 2 weeks' time, we will have opportunity to hear from another set of innovators around another topic, looking at how folks have been using radio. But I think both of these sessions are really wonderful examples of and chances to share the amazing work that's happening on the ground and on the front lines of this community. And so with that, I'm handing this over to Penny and Lata, and they will take us through the day. Thank you very much, and welcome again.
Yeah, thank you so much for the introduction, Jim. Maybe before I start, might be good to, I'll ask you to mute yourself and please turn your camera off during the beginning of this webinar, because we have quite a lot of people on the webinar and it might be better working with the bandwidth. Yeah, and just to quickly take you through the program, we will first start with a short introduction on measurement for change, just for those who don't know it yet. And then we will have 3 presenters today, as Jim already mentioned. And the last half hour will be a panel discussion in which we hope we can all engage all of you. So that is something you can expect today. Before I start, for those who don't know me yet, my name is Lot van der Haar. I work as a junior researcher at the Center for Global Challenges at the University of Utrecht. I'm a psychologist and economist by training. And over the past year, I got the chance to work with a couple of teams from Saving Brains and others to support them and the Measurement for Change team to support them with the series. So that's my role in this process. Penny, can you start sharing the slides? Yeah, that's great. Thank you. I hope everyone can see it, but I think you can, because at least I can. So Jim already briefly mentioned today's goal, but I will just quickly go over to it again, just so we're all clear on the goal of today. Because as the title of the webinar already said, today we will discuss how to apply the measurement for change framework to practice, or how others have already applied it and what we can learn from that. And we will tackle this through discussion of a number of papers who have been published in a special issue in Frontiers in Public Health, which is named Effective Delivery of Integrated Interventions in ECD, Monitoring, Evaluation, Learning and Evidence Use. And to this series, many Saving Brain innovators contributed. And first of all, I would like to say that this is a great accomplishment, and I would like to thank all of you who contributed to that. That's great, and you all worked really hard to accomplish that. And also, I would like to especially welcome and also thank the editors of the series, who are also, some of them are also present today. So that's Abby Gaidane, Nasli Khatib, and Zahir Kazi. And unfortunately, Jane Fisher couldn't be here today, but we're also, of course, very thankful to her, because without these four editors, this series would not have been possible, I think. So many thanks to all of you. And then back to measurements for change, because some of you might have already had a bit more experience with measurement for change than others of you. So therefore, we will start with a brief discussion on why it was developed, what it is, and how it was developed. So all of you will probably be familiar with the term measurement of change, which is the measurement of the outcome of a program or intervention, but might not be familiar with measurement for change. And we use this term to describe measurements for evidence-based decision-making that will be used throughout all stages of intervention design, scaling, and implementation. And over the past year, Penny, can you maybe share the slide with the aspirations? Yeah, that's great, thank you. So over the past year, the Measurement for Change team, which is a team of scientists and practitioners working in the field of early childhood development, have been working on the development of a set of aspirations of measurement for change. And these are deliberately called aspirations since they're not meant to be prescriptive, but they're meant to guide your decision-making processes. And on this slide, you can see we describe them as 5 distinct aspirations, but in practice, you will see they overlap. I will quickly give definition of all these aspirations, because I hope this will help you during the discussion later on. But if you're interested to learn more about these aspirations, you can also read the paper, which is named The Aspirations of Measurement for Change, and it has the link on the slide here as well. And also during the discussion, we will have more examples, and hopefully it will become more clear to you what these mean. To start with the first one, a dynamic MEL system has the capacity to adjust frameworks, processes, or methods to be responsive to challenges, surprises, or opportunities, and to be able to reach learning goals. A dynamic approach thus anticipates that as projects progress, new information and knowledge will be created, and this will inform new adaptations to the intervention. The second aspiration, the inclusive aspiration, describes a MEL system that has the capacity to identify and actively involve all stakeholders in making contributions to and benefiting from measurement and learning. Stakeholders then range from the children involved in the program to policymakers at the national level. Stakeholders should not be included simply as sounding boards, but as genuine partners. The third aspiration, the informative aspiration, describes a MEL system that has the capacity to continuously seek, assess, and use information from various sources to guide decision-making. You can think of a wide range of sources that you can use here, both quantitative and qualitative. The interactive aspiration describes a MEL system with the capacity to observe, track, and utilize interactions, responses, and relationships. And the fifth aspiration, the people-centered aspiration, describes a MEL system that has the capacity to be responsive to distinct and different goals, strengths, priorities, circumstances, characteristics of different people and communities. It thus recognizes that no individual matches the average and no context is exactly the same as another. Can you go to the next slide, Penny? On this slide, you see the process of the aspiration development visualized. And as I briefly mentioned in the beginning, it started with the challenge of effective delivery and scaling of interventions. And this challenge brought a group of scientists and practitioners together. And together they developed the Measurement for Change framework, which they then consulted with other practitioners in early childhood development in a couple of times, such as in Utrecht or at the WARDA workshop. And at the same time, the team pushed forward a special issue, which has already been mentioned a couple of times before, in which they asked people to describe how they use their monitoring, evaluation, and learning systems to generate effective behavioral change. And on this slide, it says we have 29 articles today, but actually yesterday I took a quick look and we even already have 30 articles accepted today. So that's really great. Out of those, 17 report on the process of the cycle of implementation, 6 report on methods and tools, and 4 reports on evaluation. And if you want to learn more about the process of development, there's also a paper who describes this process, which is named Measurement for Change from Idea to Approach. And you can also find the link to this paper on the slide. Then only left to say that, as you can see on the visual, this is an ongoing process. So the aspirations will be in ongoing development as we move forward. Today, we invited 3 teams to present their papers on how they use their mail systems and data for design, implementation, or scaling. And we're very happy to have these 3 teams presenting today. And each of the teams will present for 10 minutes. And then there will be, or roughly 10 minutes, and then there will be a few minutes for questions. I will ask the audience to post your questions in the chat. You can already post them during the presentations, and then after the presentations, I will take out a few questions which can be asked to the presenter. And then first, I will give the floor to Vida Slemming, who's a lecturer at the University of Witwatersrand in Johannesburg, South Africa. And she will present how she and her team members, Roisin Drisdale and Linda Richter from the Healthy Pregnancy, Healthy Baby program, use their mail system to generate change.
Thanks very much, Lotta. So just to give a brief background to the study, Penny, I think you're going too fast. I can't keep up. So the study was conducted in Soweto, Johannesburg, and really sought to leverage the South African government's commitment to 1 antenatal ultrasound for all pregnant women before 24 weeks gestation at a district level. However, this is not universally accessible as yet, and so we opted to use a tertiary level setting for our study site, as women who are deemed high risk receive routine antenatal ultrasounds as part of their care. So this was a 2-arm randomized control trial. Thanks, next slide. And for the intervention group, this is a simplified theory of change. So for the intervention group, we aim to augment this routine antenatal care service, in this case, the ultrasound scan, with information about fetal and infant development and parental health and well-being, with the aim to increase the parents' investment, not only in the survival, but also the healthy growth and development of their offspring. We also wanted to increase engagement and participation of fathers during pregnancy, but also in childcare, thereby trying to improve child development, parent-infant interaction, infant feeding practices and growth, parental well-being, increasing father involvement, not only in the child's health and well-being, but also that of the mother, and improve pre- and postnatal clinic attendance. Next slide, please. So how do we use measurement to inform our decision-making? So we use different types of data, quantitative and qualitative data from a variety of sources, both through our formal data monitoring systems and data collection procedures and other more informal methods. As an example, our research staff observed that partners who attended the ultrasound displayed great interest in the encounter and often became very emotional during the ultrasound scan when they visualized the fetus on the screen or heard the fetal heartbeat. Pregnant women who attended with their partners also sent our research staff messages via WhatsApp and SMS to explain to them how this experience really positively influence their relationship with their partners, enhancing their partner support and interest in the pregnancy and in the health and well-being of the mother and the unborn baby. Due to the observational data we collected and the informal feedback we received, we then sought an ethics amendment to video a small number of couples during the ultrasound scan to illustrate especially men's responses to the encounter, as well as to add some more information on partners to the follow-up visits, as this was highlighted as a gap. This is an excerpt from one of the messages sent by one of the participants to our research staff, saying, "It was an awesome day, most memorable for me and hubby. You have no idea how happy we are sharing this together for the first time. You brought us so close. Him seeing an unborn child for the first time made him show more care towards me." The next slide, I'm going to show you a short video clip, just illustrating some of the male partners' reactions to being part of the ultrasound scan. Next slide, please, Benny. Okay. Now there's sound to this, and you'll see that during these clips, there's also a lot of interaction between the mother and her partner, where they're talking to the baby, but also talking to each other. So
yeah, the eyes, nose, lips, chin.
Hello.
Thanks, Benny. Next slide. These clips never fail to put a smile on my face. Okay, so how did we maintain data quality and also rigor in our analysis? We employed regular whole team monitoring procedures, besides having more formalized staff meetings on a regular basis, where the whole team met and went through, reflected on our dashboard, as I mentioned here, and looked at our numbers. We also found that the research staff, who were very much on the operational side, being the day-to-day foot soldiers, also tended to meet on a more regular basis, reflecting on what went well that day, what went well that week, and what didn't go so well and how could be improved. So over time, this really created a stronger sense of peer and self-monitoring and reflection, which helped to improve the quality of the data that was being collected and also created more efficiency in our study procedures. We employed the use of a dashboard, which over time was simplified for staff, both to make it more easier to understand, but also to facilitate monitoring, particularly of the recruitment and retention procedures. We migrated from initial paper-based to electronic data capture software, which allowed for real-time quality assurance checks, not only by our data manager, but also by the staff themselves, and highlighted any particular issues on a day-to-day basis that need to be corrected quite timeously. It also enabled us to do interim descriptive analyses, which highlighted issues with the data that could be addressed promptly, such as missing data, outliers, and so on. And if we picked up a particular issue related to individuals, we could address it quite easily and quite timeously, so that we made sure that as we went on over time, like I said, the procedures were more efficient, but also the quality of the data that we collected was better, and thereby our quality assurance processes became more streamlined. Thank you. Next one. Next slide, please. So what were some of the lessons and the key messages we took away from this experience? It was to really be thinking about scalability, feasibility, replicability from the start. So what is, thinking of that pathway of transition to scale throughout the process, right from conceptualization and throughout, really to try and think about what would be the pathway to this real world application. and therefore them being flexible and adaptable. We experienced this particularly with our challenges with partner engagement, both in recruitment and retention throughout the study, and of course our responses to the COVID-19 pandemic and how we had to deal with changes to our study procedures because of that. We also adopted an ethos of working together and problem solving together. So you'll see that we try to do, build a sense of collective ownership and accountability, which really helped, particularly as the study progressed over time, and there was some consistency in staffing and relationships within the team as well. The other thing is to measure and monitor as you go, but not only using routine, sort of more formal data monitoring systems, but really the benefits that we found with using a variety of sources and different types of data, which allowed us to highlight gaps and also opportunities to try and enhance our data collection procedures and also to complement our routine data monitoring and collection procedures. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vidat. Are there any questions to Vidat? I don't see anything appearing yet in the chat, but
so my colleague Roisin, Dr. Roisin Drysdale is also on the call. So
that's great.
Roisin, I'm happy for you to contribute if you want.
Maybe we can do a warm-up question before others are typing their questions into the chat. I was wondering if there was also any cost to using these additional measurements, and if this would, if you think the benefits outweigh the costs, if there are any costs.
Yeah, there were costs because obviously we didn't factor in, the kind of video aspects, but from an equipment perspective, we'd already procured the video equipment because we use it as part of our outcome assessment. But really it was more the ethical approvals that we required because this was never part of our initial ethics application. And obviously also getting the consent from the pregnant women and their partners for us to do this. But we found that, and also some of the informal data that we managed to get was done quite spontaneously and very organically. It was never set out for, we never purposefully set out to have the women interact with the staff via WhatsApp and SMS, but it really, it was because our staff were reaching out to the women about reminders for their follow-up visits and so on, that there was also that they felt that they could send these messages and alert us to additional stuff that we probably wouldn't have known about. And then obviously the observational components were very important. So, in these ultrasound interactions, our sonographer was observing stuff, the research assistant who was with him also observed stuff and relaying that information to us to say, look, there's something more here that we're not exploring, really helped us to then decide to say, well, let's look at this. Let's try and include more information on partners in our follow-up visits to try and really unpack what's happening around partner engagement and support for the mother and the baby, not only during pregnancy, but later on when the baby's born. And then also looking at how we could really start to understand the impact of ultrasound to try and also improve father engagement and involvement, just by that highly emotive experience. So cost not so much, but a lot of other things that we had to consider.
Yeah, oh, that's great to learn about. And I saw in the meantime there also were 2 questions in the chat. I'll start with the one from Abby. How the data was used to make decision, what leads to particular decision, and what changed after the decision? Can you share an example?
Yeah, I think I just shared the example, the fact that we got these different types of information, the SMSs, the WhatsApps, the observational data from our sonographer and the research assistants, watching the partners and the pregnant women during that ultrasound interaction saying, we need to be looking at this a bit more. How can we capture this more purposefully? And so by creating these video clips, we've used it in a number of ways. It's also sensitized us to, how to, the next steps in terms of our pathway to scaling, what we need to do in terms of strengthening our understanding and so on. So it had implications, short-term implications for the study procedures, because we then added components to the study data collection that wasn't part of that initially. So these additional questions for partners at the follow-up visits, as well as these video clips, but also long-term, it's really highlighted to us that we need to do more formative work on trying to, improve partner engagement and really work on trying to understand that a little bit more and look at how we can leverage that interaction to enhance partner engagement as well, during pregnancy, but also for child care.
Thank you, Vidat, for clarifying. I just got a cue that we need to move on to the next presentation. So unfortunately, we won't have time for the second question, but maybe we can discussing during the panel discussion if it's still a pressing question then.
Thank you
so much, Vidat, for your presentation, and also thank you to your team members, of course. And then next up, I would like to invite Rita de Casia Uning da Silva and Kurt Shaw from Usina de Imaginação. And Kurt and Rita will present today how they use measurement to generate change in the Canal Co-op program.
Good morning, or I suppose good afternoon, good evening in lots of different parts of the world. I'm Kurt Shaw.
I'm Rita da Silva. Good morning.
And we're going to talk a little bit about Canal Canoa, which is a program working with families of young children in some very remote areas of the Brazilian Amazon. We began with an idea which was sort of a challenge to the traditional idea of that social innovation goes through, which is that there is something lacking in poor, marginalized communities, and that the state or an organization needs to fill in that lack. When it comes to indigenous communities in the Amazon, in fact, very much the opposite is true. We began this project with an insight of a Baniwa leader who said, look, you think about a 3 or 4 year old kid here in the Rio Negro. He's able to climb an acai palm, which is 10 meters tall. He's able to swim across the river, canoe a boat, probably speak 4 languages, distinguish 19 different kinds of manioc. And you're going to come in as somebody from Harvard, as somebody from the United Nations, as somebody, and tell us how to raise our kids? And so at the same time, you have a dynamic where the government and all of the media that these communities are coming into contact with are telling them that in fact they don't know anything. So what we tried to do is work on ideas of mirroring. How is it that we can use the mirror of the camera to show people what it is that they know, and therefore enter into a more democratic dialogue with other forces. And as I said, we use that basically with cameras. If you just click there quickly, Penny. So who is in fact the agent of change? What we'd like to think of is that the community is the agent of change and not the people who come in from outside. That's one of the reasons that the camera is so important, because it works as a mirror. So for that reason, the indigenous people are producers and not consumers of the images. We worked for many years with indigenous leaders, parents, shamans, midwives to create a series of 7 movies, and then showed these movies to different communities around, about 40 different communities around the Rio Negro area. And constantly changed the films as we got feedback from these communities. A couple of quick clicks here will show some of the results. That 70% of the participants, we used in language acquisition as a way to think about brain development. 77% of participants spoke native languages more with their children. 55% told more stories to their children. Also exchanges of herbal and traditional medicine, another click. They also began to have urban gardens as they came into smaller towns. Most importantly, however, is that every interviewed participant cited better social and family relationships. That's 100%, and that was actually a spontaneous thing. That wasn't part of our questioning. 63% cited more respect for their elders, and 77% cited better relations with other ethnic groups. So this is really important because we know the degree to which toxic stress is one of the greatest problems in early childhood. We talk about the idea of look upstream because we're looking at upstream indicators. We didn't have the capacity to do a detailed randomized controlled trial, especially in an area where there's 27 different ethnic groups, an immense amount of diversity. And so what we did is we looked at these indicators of language, of health in terms of nutrition, and in terms of the structure of families and social networks. One more click. Now, the next very important thing is that the mirror is not only a way for the community to see itself, for parents to see themselves and therefore to value what they do and do better what they do, but it's also a way to evaluate, for people to evaluate themselves, for parents to evaluate themselves, and for us to evaluate and transform the project. And that's the next slide.
Then we start to work with the first groups to modify milestones criteria and for the evaluation of results. And I don't feel I'm comfortable to speak
in English.
Yeah, sorry, I am not good speaking English. I would like to say you can continue. Sorry.
So what we found as we showed the movies, first of all, is that the amount of that this inspired different groups. For instance, we found that there were many in rural villages that people would see the movies and begin to make their own. There were new theater groups, new film groups created, also seed banks, people who wanted to use cell phones to document shamanism. And so we began to incorporate that into the issue. We used the fact of the way that these communities and parents were expanding what we had done and made our own work better. Can you click? So the big question there has a lot to do with what is the researcher looking for? And for this reason, it's very important that Hita is an anthropologist. We weren't there looking for what's wrong with the community. We were looking there for looking what's right with the community. What are the seeds of possible change in the community? And for that reason, what people began to see in themselves and in the process was fundamental. Now, this was a very interesting thing that we discovered in the first series of showings. And this picture here is one of the first showings that we did in one of the great houses in a Baniwa community. And what we discovered is that when we asked people what were the images or lessons that they got most from the movies, every single person talked about something from their own ethnic group. And as I said, there are 27 different ethnic groups. The movies are able to capture a little bit from each one. And yet having that mirror close by, being able to say, oh, look at that. I know that person. That person is speaking my language of 22 different languages in the area. That was tremendously important. Even though many of the child rearing techniques were the same between Baniwas, Coripacos, Cubillos, Tarianos, Tucanos, nonetheless, people talked very much about how important it was to have somebody say that to them from their own community and to put it on the screen. There was one person who said, you know, I didn't even know that the television could speak Baniwa. I thought it only spoke Portuguese or English. So finally, you get a real development of the support networks in that process as well, because as we showed people the movies, they would then say, oh yeah, I hadn't even thought of speaking with that midwife. That can be a support for me. Another click there. So we'll talk a little bit about data analysis. The paper that we wrote is largely about the challenges of randomized controlled trials in this context. There is no way to have separate groups. There's constant interaction. Water flows and knowledge flows from one group to the other. You also, as I said, have these very small groups that are tremendously diverse. And so all of the different things that are necessary for a remote randomized control trial are tremendously difficult. Click, Penny. So instead, we worked very much more with an ethnographic method, which is not only the fact that Hita is an anthropologist, but also that the team that was implementing all of this, so when the films were shown to the communities and to groups of parents, generally about 15 to 20 parents, the leaders of the discussion groups were all local people with university education. So we had Tariana, Tucana, Baniwa, Abare, various different groups. And so we were able to look at different responses among different groups. That ethnography was immensely important. Finally, I talked earlier about the idea of upstream indicators. We had looked very closely at other literature, seeing what were the things that are closely associated with good development results. And instead of looking directly at the growth of children, doing CAT scans of their brain, we looked at those upstream indicators. And for that, we really have to be thankful to Jim Radner and the rest of the team at Harvard, who did really good job with us helping think through that. And then finally, you get the idea of testing the theory of change, because when you do a really ethnographic analysis, then you can see, well, we thought the connection would be between this and this and this. And as we mentioned earlier, it was essential that we looked at that question of social support networks. That wasn't even really in the way that we were thinking at the beginning, but it emerged from the data and then became a central part of what we did. So to close, I want to talk about 3 different take-home messages. The first one, if you'll click there, is that the community can't simply be involved. We talk a lot about stakeholder involvement. The community is the agent of the change. When we begin with the idea that the community knows things, that parents are already doing what they can, that they know lots of things, but are challenged by poverty, by exclusion, by the exclusion of their knowledge from the dialogue. So when the community itself can be an agent of change, and when movies or academics or radio or whatever it is can help that, then you can get a real dialogue, and then you can have a real transformation. The second message, the second click, is that the randomized controlled trial is a tool. We have a large toolbox of ways to evaluate and transform what we do. And the randomized controlled trial is an excellent hammer. But there are times that we need a screwdriver. There are times that we need an awl. There are times that we need a hatchet. And there are times that we don't need any of those things, that we need to invent the new tools. And so one of our most important critiques is this hegemony of the randomized control trial. We'd like to be able to think in a much more diverse way. And then finally, the last message is that you have to have almost a software development technique. That it's not just that you do a project for 2 years, you analyze the data, and then you change it. No, you go and you're changing it constantly, in the same way that when you buy an Apple software system, you get 2.1, then 2.2, then 2.2.1. Things get changed, and you test and you figure out how it works. And we were very inspired by software development in that way. And I think that's one of the reasons that we were successful. Thank you. I think that even gives us 5 minutes for questions.
Thank you, Kurt and Rita. That's great. I saw there were already 2 questions in the chat. The first one is from Anjali Akarba. And her question is, what were the themes of the 7 films? What were their durations?
So there, we had 7 films that ranged from childbirth, pregnancy and childbirth, stimulation, so what are the things that you do with very early childhood stimulation, protection and care, how do you protect babies, language acquisition, songs, and fairy tales, education, which is once children are getting to 2-3 years old, how do you address those questions, one that I'm forgetting, and public health. Public health was the 7th one. The one that I'm forgetting is, I'm sorry, I can send that information, but they were divided into the category. But what's important here is that they were the categories that local indigenous people thought important. And we put those ideas into dialogue with the contemporary science of childhood development, but those were the way that the people of the Rio Negro divided their knowledge about childhood.
Yeah, we decide together with them. We try to ask them what's important, and we develop all the material together with the team, the local team, and they said what was very important and what can be the principal motives,
themes. Yep.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So-
That's very interesting. Oh,
Yeah, I'm really
sorry.
curious about the duration.
The
How did
duration.
you get interest?
Sure. The duration was from 7 to 10 minutes, depending on each film. And the way that the sessions would work is that as people would come, as I said, there were generally about 15 to 20 families, as we would begin showing children's films that we had made with kids there. So stories about myths, kids teaching how to make acai or tapioca or other things that were from there. And then as then people would come, they would sit down, and then they would watch one movie. They would watch that 7-minute movie and then spend 2 hours talking about it and eating local food. We would have had fish and tapioca prepared, because the idea of commensality, of eating together, is very, very important in that region. Then the next week they would come, they would see other children's films, and then one more movie. And there were 7 weeks of this process.
And then we
Thank you for
debate.
that.
Great.
Yeah, and we have a large debate with all people around, with kids and men, women, to talk about. It was very interesting how they get involved all the time, and it's like a very special moment to talk about themselves and to make this comparison about what is Brazilian health, public health, and what they are doing in their community, how they help kids to grow. And that was very important moment to discuss together.
Very
Thank you so
interesting.
much,
Thank you so much.
Kurt and Rita. Unfortunately, the time has flown by, so we already need to move on to the next presentation. But I would definitely encourage you, if you want to read more about this, also read Kurt and Rita's paper, and we can hopefully also discuss the other questions during the panel discussion, or maybe you can Rita and Kurt can have a look at the chat and see if they can also type in some of the answers. But thank you so much for your presentation. That was really inspiring. Also, I saw some other people commented that in the chat. And then I would now like to ask Sankar and Navamani to the floor, who are presenting on behalf of their organization Amar Seva Sangam, which is an organization in South Tamil Nadu, India.
Hi, everyone. Hello?
We can hear you.
Yeah, I'm Shankar Sairaj. I have done my master's in neurophysiotherapy. My colleague Navamani also joined here, and she has done her master's in MBA in project management and a qualified physiotherapist. We both are working as coordinators in the early intervention project. Early intervention and child rehabilitation program. The program aimed to provide early intervention for delayed development children with the support of digital technology. Can you go to the next slide? Yes. The early intervention therapy service providers in this program consisted of community rehabilitation workers and rehabilitation specialists. CRWs were high school graduates, rehabilitation specialists, physiotherapists, special educators, and speech trainers. CRWs and specialists received an initial 10 days training. Thereafter, the training is like on how to provide early intervention services and family-centered care based on the ICF framework and principles of CBR to children, and support their caregivers in caring their child. And regularly, they are updating their knowledge in 6 months interval. The Enabling Inclusion app was initially designed in 2014 at ASA with extreme extensive input from the team of internal rehabilitation specialists and information technology experts, which helps to document the number of details, assessments, evaluations, and progression of the children. The major feature of the app is monitoring the staff, location, and time engagement in the field accurately. This made the early intervention program easy. The primary objective of ASA's MEBRI EA program was to increase access to early identification of disabilities and provide EA therapy services to children identified with disabilities. The goal of EA service was to enhance children's physical, cognitive, communication, social, and emotional development. It reduces caregiver burden and empower families and increase inclusion and participation of children with disabilities within their families, schools, and communities. So this is about a small introduction about our program and the measurement for change and rapid cycle action in enabling inclusion program. Here we are going to discuss about how the implementation and refinement of an early intervention program for children with delayed development was informed by an iterative, intentional, and structured process of measurement. The monitoring, evaluation, and learning systems employed by ASA focused in several strands of data collection. The design and implementation of MEBRI EA program was adapted, improved, and positioned for scaling. Based on CBR principles, program changes to design and implementation were made in response to data collected and analyzed over the course of the program. These changes were the result of the application of rapid cycle evaluation. The goal of rapid cycle evaluation is to frequently evaluate a program after its implementation, which enables rapid identification of the success, needs, and opportunities. Changes can then be implemented more quickly rather than waiting to evaluate a program at its completion. The context is described, followed by the data collection method, utilized to inform changes, results from the data collection, and changes in program design and implementation that followed are presented. Finally, we reflect on data that may reveal the early effects of these implemented changes. Next slide, Penny. The program focused in many aspects. Here we have taken a sample of one area that connects the program access and caregiver change. The target groups were children with delayed development and caregivers. The target activities were focused on providing therapy and training to the delayed development children in a family-centered approach and empowering the caregiver. After providing therapy or training to the target groups, ASA measured the program engagements, modified caregiver strain index, family empowerment, child interaction, and program feedback. The overall home-based program engagement rate was 59.9 at the initially, and this gradually increased over the next 2 time periods to 79% by T3, that is within 11 to 16 months. But center-based program engagement rates started at 57% and dropped to 46% at T3, while home-based program engagement rates steadily increased with time. With the aspiration, we seek support at various levels and use the information for the betterment of the child in few months period. Next slide. ASA conducted focus group interview with 18 caregivers and 42 service providers in a random manner with the support of the evaluation team. ASA made all the stakeholders to involve in learning and made the changes. And it utilizes these interactions for positive changes. Based on the interviews, ASA planned to work on the themes, including accessibility, caregiver mental health, caregiver supports, caregiver knowledge, caregiver empowerment, and stigma. Now I handed over the session to Naumani to continue further.
Thank you. Next slide, please, Penny. Yeah, based on the rapid cycle evaluation, the findings, we have taken actions. So the actions where we taken is accessibility was a major factor in low visit attendance for children in the program and for increased caregiver strain. Parents were not able to access transportation for their children to come into the centers, early intervention centers, or go to schools or participation in the community. To improve the accessibility, The children that couldn't come to the centers because of the transportation issues were transferred from center-based services to home-based services. This allowed them to receive early intervention services right in their homes, making it very accessible. Many families prioritized their livelihood and were not available in their homes during early intervention therapy visits. So, therapy schedules were adjusted to meet the family needs and were rescheduled using the early intervention app so that the service providers were exactly when to visit the children. This ensured regularity of the services and families could expect visits at certain days. The role of service provider is expanded to address the social and environmental barriers with appropriate training for them. The fourth one is advocacy to the policy makers was done to improve accessibility in the community, such as on buses for transport and in schools. And in schools, we done accessibility ramps, grab bars, accessible curriculum, etc. And to encourage parents and school management to enroll children in school. This is one rapid cycle action we have taken. Another issue we found is assistive technology, assistive devices. Assistive technology improves the child's activities and participation. The use of these devices among the service users were very limited in our service. We had conducted a survey with service providers to understand the gaps. The common reasons we found are acceptability, that is, refusal of use of assistive devices by service users or their family members due to stigma. The second one is affordability. Families were not able to afford the assistive devices and repair and maintenance charges were high. Third one is availability. Not many assistive devices are easily available or purchasable. The rapid action taken are service users and caregivers education about the importance of assistive devices. This we did during the parents training, and we have also done a fundraising to support the equipment which is not funded by the government. A third one, mapping of vendors for various types of devices. From one vendor we cannot get all the devices, so we had mapped all the vendors to supply devices. Along with that, staff capacity building training to assess the needs of assistive devices. And also we have a dedicated staff and human resource to coordinate the process from selection and distribution of devices. Also, we are conducting regular awareness program included the purpose of assistive devices and how assistive technology improve the quality of persons with disability. Another issues we found that service providers had many barriers to completing home visits, including lack of toilets and safety concerns. Rapid cycle action taken included addressing the staff safety, well-being, and reasonable work environment. We did mapping houses and community places with toilet facilities. We introduced the program and staff engaged in the program and got permission to use the facilities. Also, we had collected the contact details of the local leaders and prominent persons and given to staff to contact in case of emergency. Community staff training on health practices and lifestyle practices were conducted, like hydration, hand washing, and menstrual hygiene for people that work outdoor. Community staff and health and safety manual and local emergency contact details distributed to all community staff. Another issue that affect program engagement of course, caregivers' mental health support and empowerment. We address this by organized psychological counseling sessions for caregivers to address their stress, formed parents WhatsApp group to share information and peer support, forming local level parents groups towards peer support and advocacy. Community stigma was a major issue we found affecting program engagement. To address the disability inclusion related stigma, the community awareness program, which was focusing more of early intervention therapy, we are modifying into diversity, inclusion, and rights of children with disability. School awareness program also included understanding various types of disability and inclusion. Next slide. So doing all this rapid cycle action, we found these changes. Caregivers train, empowerment, and child interaction. We found that there was a statistically significant decrease in caregiver strain and increased caregiver empowerment and improved parent-child interaction. We published these findings in the journal Disability and Rehab. Program engagement. The program engagement rate at the end of the first cycle was 59.9%. After all the rapid cycle evaluation and action, the program engagement rate at the fifth cycle was significantly up to 95.4% in both home-based and center-based services. This shows that our rapid cycle actions had a significant impact on both program access and caregivers' outcome. Next slide. Yeah, by enabling inclusion app, we are able to monitor the staff engagement, program engagement and visit compliance, children progress and parents feedback. With this scientific method of data collection and showcasing the outcomes of the program, we were able to influence the Tamil Nadu government to fund scaling up of this project. With their support, we are implementing in 3 districts, reaching over 3,000 children. From our research dissemination, both through publication and conference presentation, we are getting partners to implement our model of early interventions in their localities. Recently, 4 NGOs have licensed our early intervention app, and we have given them an extensive training workshop, and they are scaling up our model in their states in India. We are also having discussions with NGOs outside of India who want to implement our model. In addition, local district admin interested in the program and invited us to collaborate with the government services, including education and health department, to have an integrated home-based early intervention services, one of the mandatory services. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Nathamani and Shankar, for your presentations. Because of the time, I suggest we directly move into the panel discussion. So maybe everyone in the panel can put on their cameras so we can all see you. Is it just me, or is everyone still only able to see Nathamani in the slides?
Yeah, we've all got our cameras on, Lotte.
Oh, okay, then it must
For
be
the
just
panel,
me.
the panelists, I think.
Yeah, sorry, it's fixed. Can I remind everyone to please put your questions or reactions to the panel member in the chat, and then we will ask some of you to introduce your question live as well. Before this webinar, we asked all panel members a few questions to using the aspirations to illustrate from their own practice what the added value was, and also what a challenge of implementing one of the aspirations was. Penny, can you put the next slide on? Yeah, on this slide, you can all find the aspirations, just to remind you and also have for reflection on your own work. Maybe I can start with Virat to use one of the aspirations to illustrate a useful practical method that you applied or developed and how it has helped you.
Thanks, Lotte. So yeah, I'll speak to the dynamic aspiration. So a conceptualization of the study, it was intended to be a 3-arm randomized control trial. So we had 2 intervention arms. We would get women at an ultrasound scan before 25 weeks gestation, where we'd incorporate the intervention into that interaction with a woman and her partner, and then do follow up at 6 weeks and 6 months. And we had a second intervention arm where we had an ultrasound at less than 25 weeks gestation, but then another one at less than 36 weeks gestation, and then followed them up later. And then obviously our control group. But being in a busy tertiary hospital with a very complex setting, they see to about 24,000 births a year. We used the fetal medicine unit as our site for enrolling women into the study, and we relied on the staff there to be part of the screening and recruitment process, because all the women had to be screened to make sure that they were able to participate in the study and weren't deemed high risk or didn't have complications to the pregnancy themselves or the fetus. So yeah, we had lots of delays with recruitment, which obviously affected the study timelines, and obviously the study funding and timelines are set. And so we had to make difficult decisions. And so we had to adjust our study from a 3-arm trial to a 2-arm trial, combining the intervention arms into one, where all the women then had one ultrasound scan. So an additional study ultrasound scan at less than 25 weeks gestation, where they then had exposure to the intervention. And then we followed everyone up at 6 weeks and 6 months postnatal. Thanks.
Thank you for sharing Vedat. Is there also somebody from the floor who wants to reflect on this aspiration using an example from their own work, or reflect on Vedat's example? Please put them in the chat, then we can introduce you. Maybe just to warm up, I know that Navamani and Shankar also wanted to speak about the dynamic aspiration. Maybe I can invite you first.
Yeah.
Navamani or Shankar, are you ready to share your
Yeah.
example about dynamic? Yeah, okay, go ahead.
Yeah. Our program is dynamic in the sense we have the program activities and the activities planned to achieve the outcomes and the goals. But the program, the activities are very strict. We did the rapid cycle evaluation, but we were also able to change the activities a little bit so that to achieve the final goals. Like from the children who were in the center-based, some of the children were receiving the center-based services and some of the children were receiving the home-based services initially. But by doing the rapid cycle evaluation, we were able to shift the children from the center-based services to the home-based services. We were able to adjust, do these changes. So our system is not entirely very strict. So it is dynamic to adjust the changes, the required changes. So that's one thing I can share. And Shankar,
Thank you so much, Navamani.
Yeah.
I also invite others to react to that in the chat. And then in the meantime, I would like to ask Kurt and Rita to talk about the inclusive aspirations.
I think that as our presentation made pretty clear, the feedback process through which we would make films with the community and then show them to other communities and then transform the films based upon the way the things that were lacking or needs that other ethnic groups or tribes would have shows really well. So the question of interactivity, of inclusivity, and of dynamism. But I wanted to talk a little bit also about one of the major challenges that we faced to make something people-centered, which is that the upper Rio Negro of the Amazon is an extremely large area. It's larger than than many European countries. I think it's the size of France. And there are 40,000 people who live there. There are lots of places that it takes 15 days in a canoe to get to a community. And so in order to do that process of really seeing what traditional communities are like and interacting with that and getting that feedback from many different places, it's a tremendous challenge. It's not an easy thing to go. The longest trip that we took was 11 days, I think. But to go 11 days up the river and talk with each of these communities, it's tremendously challenging. It's not something that is a simple process, but that's what made the results so rich.
And also the idea of, because they have, they have common culture also, but some groups are very different, like the Hupida
Or the
Yanomamis, and that group we tried to work with them, but it was not easy just because it's so far away and not simple to make contact, the first contact. And then we decide to be only
to focus on the riverine groups and not on the ones that are in the interior. That's where the cultural difference was. And that also emerged from the data. We began to see that it wasn't working as we had planned. And so we focused on what would work. And in the long term, it would then be possible to do a very similar process, but with the Yanomami or the Yahupide, which have very different ideas of childhood.
Yeah,
that's a great example. And I know some others on the panel also indicated that the people-centered aspiration is quite a challenge still for them. Maybe I can invite Shankar and Navamani to explain a bit more.
Yeah. In the people center, in the inclusion of children with disability in the schools and the community, it is not only the intervention which helps. So there are many things involved in the inclusion of children with disabilities. We have to prepare the families, we have to prepare the school management, we have to prepare the community. So it is in all the aspects. So from the directly working with the children and the families, we have now into the more of empowering the parents. The program is modified to, forming the parents group, empowering the parents. So these are the changes we are doing in our program.
Thank you for sharing. I'd be really interested to hear from the audience if this is also a challenge that some of you recognize, and maybe some also have some advice for other programs. So please put these in the chat. And in the meantime, I'll ask Vida to also comment on this.
Thank you, Lotte. So yeah, for us, we sought out very purposefully to include male partners in our study. So when the pregnant woman was enrolled in the study, she also received an invitation card for a partner, inviting him to attend the ultrasound visits, the study ultrasound visits, and with her. We followed up by a telephone call and so on, but found that getting the partners to attend was really difficult. For a number of reasons. There were financial barriers, so they were in employment, they couldn't take a day off work, also personal reasons, things related to relationships and so on. And so we tried to accommodate some of these barriers during the study process by offering ultrasound visits and follow-up visits on weekends, and following up more frequently by telephone and so on. But yeah, it remained a challenge throughout, not only at the recruitment, but also at the retention during the study. But what the findings from the study highlighted was that this really was a formative experience for men, because you saw in the clips that I showed you what an emotive experience it was for many of them who never ordinarily are part of, coming to antenatal visits, much less seeing their baby on an ultrasound scan with a woman, with their partner. And so we found also, our findings showed that the men who had attended the ultrasound visits with their partners were, positively influenced their relationship. They were more supportive towards the woman. They were more aware of, her health and well-being, but also that of the baby. They provided more information. They were more practically helpful as well than those who didn't, or those in the control group. And, obviously it shows that there are potential benefits, but we also have to think very carefully, and it really sensitized us to not only trying to think on our feet during the study implementation process, but also as we move forward, that we need to be much more focused in our engagement and thinking about how do we improve and try and enhance male engagement in antenatal care, but also in childcare. So much more focused work for us moving forward, trying to really work on that aspect of the study. Thank you.
Thank you, Vida. Yeah, I'm also really curious to hear from the audience. Maybe there's someone who can talk a bit more about how they see the informative aspiration applied to their own work. Please, you can also just unmute yourself and speak to your and start speaking about your program. I see Kurt is also.
Yeah, Lotte, I wanted to respond to the two questions that came up because I
Sure.
think that they actually are very important in terms of thinking about measurement for change. The first question, which was from Cleogenia Ryan, she asks about the question of external influencing factors and how can you attribute changes to your intervention rather than a combination of other factors. And so that's tremendously important because by doing a much more anthropological ethnographic analysis, of course we include in the evaluation many more traditional things, but by using that, you're able to connect the steps in a theory of change. Very often the theory of change is sort of a black box. Okay, you have an intervention and you have a result, and what is it that in between A and Z that makes that happen? But when you have a really profound ethnography that's going on, you can understand why that happens. For instance, we had a very interesting conversation with an older midwife, and she said, you know, I moved to the city 20 years ago and came to the city and thought, well, you know, I'm here, I'll talk to my kids and my grandkids in Portuguese. Then I was watching the movies, I was talking with people, and I realized, you know, speaking Yingatu with my grandchildren makes more sense to me. It makes more sense to them. I can communicate with them. I can have a relationship with them. And that's so much better for them in the long term. Their brains are going to be better. They're going to be stronger people. They're going to be smarter people. So why in the world am I talking with my kids in Portuguese, with our grandkids in Portuguese? And so that by having those very detailed, thoughtful, qualitative, but really ethnographic conversations, you understand why you get from A to Z. The connection makes sense. And then the second question had to do with software development and why you use that as a metaphor. And software development is just one way of thinking, but there are lots of different ways that products are developed. And software makes sense because we work a lot with technology. And when you change software, it's not like it's not like developing a car. You go and you make very small changes. And when you download the new operating system for your computer, probably there are only a couple of bugs that were fixed, but those things may make a really big difference. And then so you'll make lots of small changes that go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then suddenly you'll move from to a really big major change. We also thought a lot about Thomas Kuhn's structure of scientific revolutions, because that's how it is that change happens. So you make small changes within the paradigm, and then occasionally the whole paradigm breaks down and you do something new.
Thank you for answering that question, Kurt. I saw that Fiona answered excellent, thanks. So I think that answers her question. And thank you for that. I saw, Shankar, you unmuted yourself. Was there something you wanted to add?
Yeah, I would like to give some more points about this theory of change. This is really, we should thank about the GCC, Saving Brains, and the editorial part of the Empori paper people. Because every research have question is there as well as some solutions are there. And meanwhile, they are making a lot of changes. But how the changes happen because of this lot of learnings from the networking area. So we got different kind of learnings from different people all over the world, and GCC and Saving Brains gave the platform for that one. That was a really gives aspirations for us, because all the data we collected from the application, and we conducted interviews, lot of interviews we collected, and based on that we tried to modify it. But we got more ideas when we are interacting with the other team, how they are doing the changes. So that influences a lot. Thank you.
That's a great addition. Thank you. I'm just curious here. I know there are also some teams who also wrote a paper in the series present today. maybe some of them would like to speak a bit more about one of the aspirations. As just as Shankar mentioned, that it's really helpful to learn from other teams how they use it and how they use measurements for change. For example, is Jonathan's team here as well? Maybe they can talk about the inclusion aspiration. Or Barbara and Randall, do you want to share your example with the rest?
Hi, Lottie. How are you doing?
Great to see you here.
Thank you. It's nice to be here. Sorry, I was just coming off from another call, or actually someone came into my office. Could you repeat the question, and then I'm happy to provide my 2 cents worth of insight.
Yeah, we were talking about how you used one of the aspirations, or if you can illustrate using one of the aspirations, how a useful practical method you applied or developed and how it has helped you or how it has given you added value.
Yeah, see, in terms of like, you know, being able to measure or, you know, move on the fly with adapting what we were doing to capture or to adapt our intervention program based on, you know, what was happening, the feedback we were getting on the fly. Is that what you mean, or?
Yeah, or yeah, maybe you can elaborate a bit more on how you use measurement for change and maybe using one of these aspirations if these speak to what you have been doing.
Sure, yeah. I mean, we had a couple of things. The one thing that kind of stood out the most for us was when we were trying to figure out, okay, you know, we were interested in measuring early child development. So one of our biggest challenges, and I think a lot of the big challenge that a lot of teams had at the very beginning, you know, going way back to 2014 was when we really got started, 2013, 2014. It was really about, okay, how do we improve early child development, you know, in the first 1,000 days. And when we started, our biggest problem was, you know, there are very, very few assessment tools to accurately and effectively measure what you're trying to achieve. So, you know, you're implementing all sorts of different interventions. Ours was specifically focused on trying to reduce corporal punishment and violence. And then, so you implement your program, you work with the parents, and then you hope that you're changing knowledge, attitudes, and behaviors in the parents, reducing the amount of corporal punishment that's being used. And at the same time, the other side of the seesaw, which is improving social emotional connection. So we were trying to, and it was kind of like this. And then, of course, you're really, one of the steps in the process is measuring, you know, this corporal punishment piece, this violence piece, and also measuring this social emotional connection piece, because the theory or the hypothesis was that they would seesaw like this. But then also the ultimate goal is looking at the outcomes in the children and neurodevelopment per se. So this one we had a real challenge with because, again, there were so few at the time reliable measures of early child development. We ended up finding the INTER-NDA, which had just recently been developed. And then we started, you know, we wanted to use that. But then, and that was going to be, you know, our measurement. Now, the problem is adapting it for the environment in the Caribbean. And when we started going through, we started using the tool, and then we quickly realized that there were some aspects of this assessment tool that just didn't apply. Or moms in the Caribbean context were having a difficult time interpreting, understanding, and the children, because you're assessing the children, and they're very young, they're 2 years of age, so they've got some language skills, but not very well developed. They were having a hard time understanding some of the language that we were using, and you want to be as precise as possible because you want to have the standardization of the tool. And so we were using the feedback mechanism of, okay, well, we can see what's happening. This I would say is, I guess, I would say it's the dynamic component, where you could see, okay, we have to change this. We're seeing what's coming back. We've got, you implement those quick feedback loops as much as you can. And to get those quick feedback loops so that we could see the problems we were having, you have to really empower your team, right? And so the assessors who were empowered and trained to provide that assessment tool, they are the ones that came back to us and said, there's a problem here. We think that kids aren't scoring as well as they possibly could be scoring, so therefore we're not getting an accurate measure because of these problems with language and understanding the tool. And so I think that a couple of pieces is one, empowering the team to provide that sort of feedback and to make changes. The team then made the changes to the tool. And two, understanding from the top down, setting a culture of this dynamic concept that you're never going to be set, right? You're always going to have to be innovating and changing. And so I think if you set the mindset that dynamic changes are just a part of the process, everybody understands that. And everybody starts to get into the mindset of, or get comfortable with this concept that things are constantly going to be changing and in flux, which is a little bit anxiety provoking, right? Because we don't like change. As a general rule, humans like things to be set. But if you can start to talk about this concept that being in flux is the norm, that is the setting, right? It's kind of a meta concept of the continuity of dynamism, if you will. And so that's something that really, I think we've learned and our team has learned. And then of course, COVID came, and then it's like, everything's in flux,
story.
right? Everything was in flux again, right? And you had to adjust how you're interacting with the parents, how your team, your coaches were interacting, everything changed again. But I think we adapted really well because our team had taken up this idea of dynamism, this idea of things are always in flux. And so the team did amazingly well in adapting to COVID on the fly.
Thank you so much, Penny. This is a really helpful example. Thank you so much for sharing. Cool. And it also illustrates there's a nice overlap between the different aspirations and how they intertwine. I saw there's also a question from Jamie in the chat, which will also be the last question because it's almost time. But Jamie, maybe you can ask it out loud. It's to the ESSA team.
Sure. Did I succeed in unmuting?
Yeah, you did. Great.
Okay, I'll try to make my camera go on too. Hello, everybody. All of these were really very inspiring. Hi. It was remarkable. We saw in the graph, you use this rapid cycle, very richly informative approach to really change the trend line, both on the home and the center in terms of engagement. So something powerful really happened there. And then I noticed in your last slide, you described a partnership strategy, both in Tamil Nadu and internationally, to broaden the reach of what you're doing. And so my question in the chat was, do you have a way of helping the partners enact the same kind of thing that you did in terms of improving the engagement and deepening the work that they're doing as they go?
Yeah, thank you, Jamie. The question is a very good question you asked here. Really, whatever the strategies we followed here, definitely it will help in the scaling up part. But apart from this, in the new scale-up area where we are now working in 3 districts, entirely we are getting a new challenges also. It is not only where we 3 years worked. Based on the challenges, we continuously evolved and we brought new changes in our program. Similarly, now also we are refining our program when we are doing the scale-up in different places. So according to the places and the staff, even it starts from staff recruitment. There are a lot of new challenges we are facing, and according to challenges, we are refining the program. Definitely, that will help.
Thank you.
Is it okay, Jamie?
That answer your, yeah, I think it answers your question, Jamie. Thank
Yeah,
you for asking, and thank you for answering, Shankar. And with that, I would like to round off the session, unfortunately, because I see I have 1 minute left. Many thanks for all the panel members and presenters, and for also to the audience for engaging in the conversation today. Was really inspiring session, at least that's what I found. I hope you did as well. And I'd just like to close with mentioning that this is not the end of the aspirations development process. We'll definitely continue the dialogue going forward, and we're also working with the Measurement for Change team to build the evidence base to see if these are actually helping people in practice, because the end goal is obviously to generate systems that support effective delivery at scale. And if you want to read more about the papers, I would definitely encourage you to go and visit the website of Frontiers Public Health, which is listed on the slide. And if you want to find more materials and resources about Measurement for Change, there's also a lot of material available on the Saving Brains learning platform. So definitely also encourage you to take a look at that. And many thanks again to all.
Thank you.
Maybe, oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Thank you all very much for your contributions today. I do suggest you go and read these materials. There's a lot more detail there. And if you are inspired to tell your story in more detail, then please get in contact with us, because we couldn't have had today without people having put their narratives together and shared them. And we would like to learn more from the rest of you. Over to you, Jim.
Thank you, Penny. Thank you, Lotta. Thank you for the 3 teams who shared their experiences and their truly tremendous work with us. Again, just reiterating where those resources are, go look for them. We'll share those links again in the slide deck and recording that we send out in a couple of days. And we look forward to seeing many of you back here in 2 weeks' time, same time on March 31st. To hear from 3 other teams who have been experimenting with radio as an important means of communication and outreach, and the strategies around that sort of use of media. So again, we're looking forward to another rich opportunity to really hear from and share the experiences of your colleagues and you all in the work that you are doing. And so for now, thank you. Enjoy the rest of the day, however much that remains, wherever you are around the world. Stay well. And best wishes on the work you continue to do for families and children in so many corners of our globe. And for all of us at the Saving Brains Learning Platform team, take care. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Thank you. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.